Over the last 24 hours, several attempts have been made by Hamas terrorists to probe the yellow line being guarded by the IDF. And also, in the last 24 hours, the remains of a fallen hostage was returned to Israel as President Trump acknowledged that Hamas is in violation of the ceasefire agreement, but he's willing to give them a little more time to behave. He added, "They will behave nicely, and if not, we will annihilate them, and they know it." And meanwhile, Egypt is pushing the idea of a multinational force to enter Gaza and to restore order, and there is already a list of countries ready to contribute troops, but Israel opposes this move as the dispute over the implementation of Phase B of this plan is intensifying. Speaking of which, Israeli officials are also demanding that the American administration not begin Gaza's reconstruction until Hamas shows on the ground a readiness to disarm, and there are still no answers to the question of neutralizing the tunnels inside the Gaza Strip. In related news, Turkish and Qatari operatives are already on the ground in the Gaza Strip, working on different projects, and Israeli commentators are furious, saying this was a risky move that could have very serious consequences for Israel. And as if to prove that point, documents recovered in Gaza by the intelligence teams were revealed this week, showing that Hamas and Al Jazeera, the Qatari-based news agency, were closely cooperating throughout this war, including in areas that constitute direct psychological warfare. Elsewhere, Egypt has warned the United States not to assassinate Hamas senior leadership on their soil, even as the IDF confirmed that it is continuing to strike Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, and Syria says that there have been 130 IDF operations since the fall of the Assad regime, most of them 50 kilometers from Damascus. And further afield, they are laughing at America and Iran as they rehabilitate their nuclear sites, and Ayatollah Khamenei openly mocks President Trump, saying that he should keep dreaming if he thinks that Iran's nuclear project was destroyed. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host Yair Pinto, reporting to you about everything that's happening in Israel. So a day after Hamas claimed that it located the remains of the fallen hostages in the Gaza Strip and said it would transfer him to Israel if field conditions will allow it, the IDF received the coffin and it was transferred to the Institute of Forensic Medicine for analysis. However, Hamas terrorists are crossing the yellow line and approaching IDF forces in the Gaza Strip already twice in order to probe the area and test the response of our forces. And despite these probes, the threat level in the Gaza Strip is assessed to be low, and the IDF is preparing for the release of reservists, IDF soldiers that were called from civilian lives to this war. Elsewhere, President Trump sent an explicit threat towards the Hamas Monday evening, posting on Truth Social that the United States will eliminate Hamas if it continues to violate this agreement. Despite American involvement and the threats, Trump clarified that the United States is not expected to send ground forces into the Gaza Strip, but if I say Israel will enter, they will do it within 2 minutes, according to Trump. On Tuesday, US Vice President J.D. Vance will arrive in Israel to join Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner for consultations on how to bridge the gaps between Jerusalem and Cairo. Egypt seeks to impose a Security Council resolution on Gaza that will include the insertion of a multinational military force into the Strip, including Turkish forces. Israeli diplomats returned from Cairo this week after discussing these issues with officials from Egypt and from other regional countries, and Israel has warned that we will not allow Erdogan's soldiers a foothold in Gaza. Nevertheless, a force of 4,000 soldiers led by Egypt and also including forces from Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Indonesia is currently being prepared to enter the Gaza Strip very soon. The Egyptian foreign minister emphasized a task force must provide support to the Palestinians who will be managing their affairs. In a related development, Egypt has also warned against the assassination of Hamas senior leaders on their soil, saying that this could lead to the collapse of the ceasefire agreement. It was also reported that Witkoff's visit will deal with the reconstruction conference for Gaza. And Israel is demanding that the reconstruction of Gaza will not begin until Hamas shows a willingness to disarm of its weapons. Also, the questions of neutralizing the remaining tunnels is being discussed with the Americans. And in another related development, the Qatari hospital in Gaza announced the start of preparations to establish the main headquarters of Hamad Hospital, founded by the Qatari Fund for Development, and at the same time, civilian campaigns in Qatar are raising funds for projects in the Gaza Strip. All of that sounds like good news, but there's also a darker side to Qatar's involvement in the Gaza Strip. A new study by the Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center think tank describes how Hamas transmitted detailed coverage and instructions to the Qatari-based Al Jazeera network, set up for its secure phone line for real-time coordination, and operated journalists who simultaneously served as terrorists in Hamas's military wing in the Gaza Strip. The conclusion of the report includes the line that Hamas saw Al Jazeera as an integral part of its psychological warfare array. And further afield, the Iranian nuclear program is back in the news, as the regime has announced it is suspending cooperation with the IAEA, and Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei openly mocking President Trump, saying he should keep dreaming if he thinks that the program was destroyed. At the same time, a report by the Institute for Science and for International Security think tank reveals extensive construction works at the Iranian military site previously linked to developing the trigger mechanism for a nuclear bomb, including the construction of new roof-fortified buildings. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel as the battle continues against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region which are operating under the control of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And before we begin, I need to remind you that extreme Islamic organizations have launched a smear and fake news campaign against Israel. They spread lies about Israel, prompting anti-Jewish and anti-Israel hatred all over the world, and it's working. We are here to fight back, and our weapon is the truth. And we need you so that we can continue spread it so to many people around the world, so that they will know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So if you want to help us, make sure to hit the like, leave a comment, share this video, and hit the subscribe button on TBN Israel YouTube channel so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now, we start today's report with the transfer to Israel on Monday evening of another coffin containing the remains of a fallen hostage who had been held in the Gaza Strip. This time, it was the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. This is a General Command terrorist organization handing over a coffin to the Red Cross, who then brought it to the IDF forces so it can be moved into Israel. The Ministry of Health announced that the remains had arrived at the Abu Kabir Institute for Forensic Medicine in Tel Aviv for identification. Already the day before yesterday, Hamas announced that it had located a fallen hostage and that it intended to hand him over to Israel if the field conditions will allow it, according to Hamas, but it delayed it and did not do so until Monday evening. After examining the remains, the police announced that they belonged to Tal Haimi, a member of the emergency squad in Nir Yitzhak, and who fell defending the community on October 7, 2023, and his body was kidnapped into the Gaza Strip. He left behind his wife, Ella, and their 4 children, including Lotan, who was born after October 7th and will not get to know her father. And meanwhile, while it has been already proven how fragile the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip is, President Trump's envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are in Israel this week and met with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other senior officials. Meanwhile, a Hamas delegation led by Khalil al-Haya is meeting today with Egyptian and with Qatari officials in Cairo to discuss developments and the day after the war in the Gaza Strip. But these meetings were also accompanied by more attempts by Hamas terrorists to probe the IDF defenses along the Yellow Line in the area of Sajaiya neighborhood in eastern Gaza City. According to the IDF spokesperson, the forces fired at the terrorists who crossed the Yellow Line in order to remove the threat. And following this incident, Defense Minister Israel Katz instructed the Yellow Line be marked and told IDF officials to pass a clear message to Hamas leaders in Gaza via the American monitoring mechanism. According to him, any Hamas terrorist found beyond the Yellow Line in territory under Israeli control must evacuate immediately. Hamas leaders will bear responsibility for any incident. However, and whoever remains in the area will serve as a target for attacks without any further warning, so as to allow IDF forces to act freely and immediately against any threat. The protection of IDF soldiers is at the top of the priority list, and we will take all necessary steps to ensure this. This follows Sunday morning's incidents in which a Hamas ambush in Rafah in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip resulted in 2 fatalities amongst the IDF troops, where 3 others were severely wounded. Israel responded with a series of air and naval bombardments of Hamas positions in Rafah and in Khan Yunis before announcing the renewal of the ceasefire under intense American pressure. Also, the transfer of aid to the Gaza Strip through the Kerem Shalom and the Kisufim border crossings was renewed, while the Rafah crossing remains closed. The IDF assesses that incidents like the one that occurred on Sunday in Rafah will continue to occur in the coming months in the large enclaves under the IDF hold throughout the Gaza Strip between the system fence on the old border and the more internal withdrawal line, which is also known as the Yellow Line. These are dozens of square kilometers, most of which have been flattened for buildings in recent months to make sure that Hamas terrorists cannot use them as sniping positions against our troops, but there are still tunnels beneath them with terrorists hiding inside. Although Hamas has agreed to the ceasefire, it is becoming apparent that many individual terrorists feel at liberty to ignore this, and steps might be taken to pressure Hamas to exert control over these rogue elements in the Palestinian areas. Furthermore, when the IDF arrives to scan the tunnels and complete their destruction as part of the ceasefire agreement, the terrorist traps in them fight for their lives, as already happened on Friday in 2 similar incidents in Khan Yunis and also in Rafah. These incidents were pushed to the margins of the news cycle in the shadow of the return of the fallen hostages and the fact that they ended without IDF casualties. However, the 2 events on Friday are considered the first significant violation of the ceasefire. Quick responses by the forces prevented casualties to the IDF troops amongst our soldiers in both cases, while the terrorists were eliminated or fled. But it was clear to commanders in the field from the first hours of the ceasefire that there would be still flare-ups against terrorists. Also, every day in the last 10 days, the IDF has carried out warning fire towards Palestinians while building its new outposts along the Yellow Line. And in the meantime, the IDF is conducting assessments regarding the continued presence of forces in the Gaza Strip out of the understandings that the more the agreement holds and the IDF withdraws to the Yellow Line, fewer forces will be used. And in the coming days, the assessments will continue and formal notices are expected to go out to reservists, letting them know that they are being demobilized and can go back home. That's good news, of course, but I want to ask you to continue and praying for these soldiers as they go back to their civilian lives, because there are many challenges ahead for them and also for their families. Now, switching our focus slightly to diplomatic news, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other senior Israeli officials met with the White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner this week to iron out details of the ceasefire plan. And at the end of the meeting with the pair, and in light of Hamas's violations, no decision was made to open the Rafah border crossing in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, and it will remain closed until the issue of returning the fallen hostages is fully resolved. However, Witkoff and Kushner made clear to Netanyahu that they expect Israel to honor the ceasefire except for self-defense by the forces deployed on the Gaza Strip. For the time being, Israel enjoys American backing for the claim that Hamas is the one that's violating the agreement regarding the return of the fallen hostages, and they accept the Israeli assertion that Hamas is not acting in good faith. However, they are urging patience as no one wants this ceasefire to blow up. And on that note, it's important to remember that the remains of 15 fallen hostages still remain in the Gaza Strip after Hamas released all 20 remaining living hostages, and in several trenches also handed over the remains of 13 fallen hostages. Technically, Hamas has already violated this agreement, since the plan called for it to release all the hostages in its hands within 72 hours from the moment that the ceasefire took effect on October 10th. Although it claims that it does not know where everyone is and that it needs heavy equipment to extract the others, Israeli officials have said that this is a lie and that Hamas can return additional remains much more quickly. This is especially true since Israel has precise intelligence information regarding the location of many of the fallen who were kidnapped and has shared these coordinates with Hamas via the mediators. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the truth and all the information straight from the field here in Israel, and I want to invite you to continue and sharing our videos on YouTube, follow us on social media, and make sure that you subscribe to TBN Israel YouTube channel so you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And speaking of having boots on the ground, I want to talk to you for a moment about a very special group of people whose boots have been on the ground here in Israel since before day one and who we all rely on in every emergency. This war may be changing shape, but the battle for life is never over. And in every moment of crisis, Magen David Adom's volunteers are first on the scene. Whether it's treating the wounded from rockets or terrorist attacks, stopping the bleedings, evacuating the injured, delivering a baby, treating a heart attack victim, or any other kind of life-saving care under fire, Magen David Adom is always there for us. But this level of readiness doesn't happen on its own. It takes medical supplies, armored protective gear, ambulances, and hundreds of hours of training. But most of all, it takes people like you standing behind them. Because even when it feels quiet, Magen David Adom is not standing still. They're training, restocking, repairing, and upgrading equipment, preparing for the next call because it will come. Now, it's our turn to show up. So let's go to SaveLifeIsrael.com and support Magen David Adom so that they keep saving lives in Israel anytime, anywhere, no matter what. Again, go to SaveLifeIsrael.com. And now we're getting back into the news and picking up on the diplomatic developments that are going on in this region. During an official dinner with the Prime Minister of Australia this week, United States President Donald Trump said that Hamas are violating the agreement. I could tell Israel, go in and take care of it, but I haven't done that yet. We'll give them some time, according to President Trump. And regarding the ceasefire, Trump said that we are taking many steps. There are 59 countries that support the agreement. There is peace for the first time in the Middle East. We made an agreement with Hamas, and they will behave nicely, and if not, we will destroy them, and they know that. Hamas murdered many people. It is a very violent organization. They ran wild. If they continue, we will go in and take care of it quickly and swiftly. However, he was quick to add that American soldiers will not operate inside Gaza. There are countries that called me when they saw Hamas's murders. They asked to go in and take care of the situation. In addition, there is Israel. They will go in within 2 minutes if I tell them, but I have not told them for now. We'll give it a chance. Hamas are very violent. They have no backing from Iran or anyone. If they do not behave properly, we will destroy them. I can speak for all Israelis when I say I'm glad to hear these words from the American president, showing that he understands who and what Hamas really is, and what we're dealing with here in Israel. and I hope that the Prime Minister of Australia and all other world leaders are paying attention. And in the meantime, reports surfaced on Monday evening that Israel is demanding of the United States not to begin reconstruction of the Gaza Strip before underground activity that will show Hamas's readiness to disarm. One of the steps now under discussion with the American administration is the question of neutralizing the tunnels inside the Gaza Strip. Israel seeks to seal all the tunnels inside Gaza under Israeli supervision, even beyond the areas of control that Israel currently holds. The American administration wants to begin a pilot in Rafah, and Israel agreed to this option. And in related news, an Israeli security delegation returned from Cairo on Monday evening after participating in discussions that lasts 3 hours with representatives from Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey. And according to sources familiar with the discussions, the parties spoke, amongst other things, about reconstruction of the Gaza Strip the day after, as well as the possibility that a foreign force will enter to operate in Gaza later on. Amongst the candidates that came up were the countries that have already agreed to participate in this move: Egypt, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Indonesia, as well as other countries that have not yet announced a decision on this matter. In a more general sense, we can see that the diplomatic developments around preparations for discussions on Phase B of the Trump plan are shifting into high gear this week, with visits to the region by senior American officials highlighted by Vice President J.D. Vance to Israel today. The talks in Israel are scheduled to address 2 topics. First, stabilizing the ceasefire in attempts to prevent its collapse, the danger of which was palpable on Sunday, and second, the infrastructure for Phase B, regarding which there are extremely deep disagreements between Israel and the mediating states, and of course, with Hamas. The main bone of contention in Egypt's attempts to impose the entry of multinational forces into the Gaza Strip, a force that is supposed to gain control even over areas that the IDF is supposed to withdraw from. Egypt wants to bring a draft resolution to the Security Council obligating the entry of the forces into Gaza and seeks to include in it a Turkish military force numbering hundreds of soldiers. Israel opposes both a forced decision in the Security Council without cooperation and consent from Jerusalem, and certainly the entry of military forces from a hostile state such as Turkey. Israeli officials have said that alongside the involvement that was apparently important by the Turkey in pressuring Hamas to accept the Trump plan, they will not be able to allow Erdogan's soldiers a foothold on our borders, and certainly not as those supposedly meant to maintain the security. One Israeli official said that Turkey hosts Hamas's leadership and the financial institutions of the Islamic terrorist organization. Its ideology is anti-Israel and grounded in the Muslim Brotherhood, and therefore it cannot be part of any force that enters the area. Recall that the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, 2 states meant to participate actively in Gaza's reconstruction, including involvement in the multinational force and in the new governing body, prefer to reduce their activity and are threatening to cut off contact entirely. They are furious at Qatar's enlarged role within the equation, and also at the fact that there is still no concrete plan to disarm Hamas, the move that, according to the 2 Gulf states, is essential for reconstruction in the Gaza Strip. The Saudi source reiterated this week that his country will not be able to enter the picture financially, militarily, or in any other way if the Trump plan is not implemented as written, that is, removing Hamas from control of the Strip and dismantling it. The source added that this is not because Israel demands it, it's because the presence of Hamas guarantees that all the billions invested will go down the drain and the buildings that will be constructed will be destroyed in the next war. I must say I admire this straightforward and candid statement by the Saudi official. He's absolutely correct, and I'm glad to see that such a clear-minded thinking and statements becoming more normal in the Middle East, especially in Arab countries. This is exactly what's needed here, and it's been needed for a very long time. Now, getting back to the Egyptian proposal, Cairo seeks to introduce as soon as possible a military source that will separate Hamas and the IDF in order to prevent clashes. But such a force does not yet exist apart from the Egyptians themselves and Palestinians whom they have trained and who are considered, even if not officially, as security personnel of the Palestinian Authority. Israel is not prepared for the entry of such forces as long as the manner of dismantling Hamas and handing over the governments has not yet been agreed upon. A security source said that with the entry of such forces, the IDF's activity will be greatly limited and its ability to prevent Hamas operatives from preparing terror operations, as is being done even now, will be impaired. Military coordination between Israel and the Americans is close, and this week the commander of the United States Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, arrived here to meet with senior defense officials about what is happening in the Gaza Strip. An American military force of about 200 soldiers is already in Israel, and its role is to monitor the ceasefire. Vice President Vance, who was supposed to land before noon on Tuesday, is coming to deal with the next stage. He will of course meet with Netanyahu and his team to hear how we in Israel see the advancement of the Trump plan and to coordinate diplomatic moves in areas such as the Security Council and with the mediators and European countries. Vance is also expected to discuss with the Prime Minister the future implications of the Trump plan and chiefly the expansion of the Abraham Accords and the economic significance of this expansion. Beyond that, it was reported that Egypt opposes Israeli vision regarding continued IDF presence in Gaza. Against this background, the Egyptians are acting to coordinate with France and Britain to promote a Security Council resolution regarding the rapid deployment of international forces in the Gaza Strip. The sources estimated that agreement on the wording of the resolution will be reached within days in order to prevent the collapse of the ceasefire agreement. However, the American administration has expressed doubts about the ability of the Europeans to advance this plan given their own domestic problems. On the other hand, the Qatari hospital in Gaza announced in recent days the start of the process of preparing the headquarters of the Hamad Hospital in the Gaza City area, founded by Qatar, for this development. The move joins a series of projects funded by Doha, Qatar, in the fields of health and education inside the Gaza Strip, and is interrupted in Gaza as another layer in the institutional infrastructure that the Qataris have been cultivating over the years. It should be noted that the Qatari mode of operation is based on specific mandates, primarily in medicine and education, that enable long-term entrenchment. Thus, alongside budget allocations to hospitals and also to clinics, Qatar's support for educational institutions, including the Islamic University of Gaza, has been mentioned in the past. In parallel, a Qatari effort has been recorded to channel civilian money into the Gaza Strip, funds perceived as less monitored through the public campaigns. And amongst other things, the campaign was launched in Qatar by the National Taxi Service, committing to transfer 5% of total ride costs to Gaza. In addition, players from Qatar's national soccer team, which qualified for the World Cup, celebrated publicly by means of donations intended for the establishment of a school, a sports field, and a hospital, projects that appear humanitarian but strengthen Qatar's civilian presence in the Gaza Strip. These Qatari moves aroused dissatisfaction in the United Arab Emirates and also in Saudi Arabia. Regional figures noted that in Abu Dhabi and Riyadh, they see Qatar's entrenchment in Gaza as bypassing oversight mechanisms formulated with regional coordination, and that it may take it harder to restrain Hamas within the future arrangements. According to well-informed regional sources, Abu Dhabi and Riyadh conveyed messages to the Trump administration that deeper Qatari involvement would lead to Hamas's entrenchment and the failure of the Trump plan. Against this background, a quiet diplomatic struggle is expected over the division of roles in Gaza's reconstruction and over the financing channels that will determine the balance of influence there. And meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, on Monday, speaking about the security situation in the Middle East and warned of what he calls new threats. According to Ariel Kana's report in Israel Hayom, an Israeli newspaper, Netanyahu hinted in his remarks that the central threat today is the attempt by Turkey and Qatar to expand their regional influence, mainly in the Gaza Strip, but also in additional areas such as Syria. According to him, the two countries are known for their support of Islamic organizations such as Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, and they strive to be a central player in managing Gaza after the end of this campaign. Netanyahu noted that Israel is acting to thwart those threats, adding, "Not everything is known, and not everything will be made known." He also emphasized the need to remain vigilant in the face of regional changes that could undermine stability. It was also reported that there are differences of opinion between Jerusalem and Washington regarding conduct towards Turkey and Qatar. While in Israel, the involvement of the two countries is seen as dangerous, in Washington, more conciliatory voices are heard, especially from the Trump administration, which continues to maintain good relations with Ankara and Doha. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on this issue. So keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, don't forget to click on the subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we're switching our focus to Iran, where newly published satellite images point to extensive engineering work at the Parchin military base, a site associated with developing the triggering mechanisms in Iran's nuclear project. This was revealed by the Institute of Science and National Security think tank in a report published on Monday evening, raising concern over the renewal of activity in the military nuclear field. According to the report, the Parchin complex, located about 32 kilometers southeast of Tehran, has for years been linked to explosive material tests as part of Iran's efforts to obtain a nuclear weapon. A 2011 International Atomic Energy Agency report already noted that a fortified test chamber was built at this site intended to examine the process of detonating a uranium core. The site was previously damaged in an airstrike during Operation Days of Atonement in October of 2024, but according to the latest report, it has not been attacked since. According to the data published in Israel Hayom, the two main buildings at the site, Talgan 1 and Talgan 2, served Iran's nuclear project, with the first containing a large test facility and the second used for experiments on technical aspects of the bomb mechanism. Much information on this activity was revealed in the nuclear archive obtained by the Israeli Mossad from Tehran in 2018, which also documented the weapons group, the most secret part of the nuclear program. The current report notes that as early as May 2025, Iran began to restore the buildings even before the outbreak of the 12-day war. In images from May 20, a temporary black cover appears to have been placed over the structure destroyed in the 2024 strike, and in June, foundation pouring and ground preparations for renewal construction were documented. Images from August 30 show the construction of a large arched roof, a building about 45 meters long and about 17 meters wide, exactly where Talgan 2 stood, alongside two smaller buildings. According to satellite images from September 27, a third building was also erected. It is assessed that the smaller buildings were designed to be able to absorb part of the explosion in the event of an airstrike and may be covered with earth for protection. The Institute emphasized that it is not possible to determine with certainty the purpose of the new buildings, but the very fact that the work is being carried out at a site that previously served the Ahmad program for developing a nuclear weapon raises grave concerns. The report warns that Iran may be trying to restore capabilities it had in the past, including the test chamber and the equipment for producing plastic explosives. The Institute concludes that although there is no direct evidence of military nuclear activity, there is a need for an immediate clarification of the purposes of the restoration in light of the strike's known history and the broad security significance of renewing such a work at that location. Speaking of a need of clarification, even 4 months after the 12-day war with Iran and the attacks by Israel and the United States on the Islamic Republic's nuclear facilities, the dispute between the sides over the fate of the facilities and the entire program still rages. US President Donald Trump insists again and again that the nuclear facilities were completely destroyed, while Iran insists that otherwise, although they admit that the facilities suffered significant damage but did not destroy their abilities to produce weapons completely. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, spoke up on Monday, making a speech in which he denied President Trump's claims, saying the United States president proudly says that they bombed and destroyed Iran's nuclear industry. That's great. Keep dreaming, according to Iran. The 86-year-old dictator of Iran, who no longer appears publicly as often as he once did, and appears to be relying for information of people who don't want to tell him anything that he does not like to hear, went on to wonder out loud, why does America care if Iran has a nuclear industry? Moving on to direct address to the President Trump, he added, "Who are you to say that any country has or does not have the right to nuclear power?" Khamenei also claimed that although the enemy boasts of eliminating our scientists and knowledge, it cannot be destroyed in a strike. It is difficult to know how to respond to such statements. Iran's clerical regime has a track record of exaggerating its abilities and downplaying its problems, especially in the nuclear arena and also in many other areas. But experts assess that the regime has in fact established for itself a fairly stable infrastructure of knowledge and skill in the field. The assessment is that the great damage to the nuclear facilities and the elimination of senior scientists will not be able to prevent Iran from restoring its nuclear program over time. However, President Trump explicitly threatened that an Iranian attempt to restore the nuclear program would lead to another strike against it. And an Israeli military and security affairs commentator, Ron Ben-Ishai, reported this month that so far there are no signs that Iran is currently trying to restore the uranium enrichment array or its efforts to produce the nuclear weapons itself, as it did before Israel and then America attacked the nuclear facilities during the 12-day war in June. Since the strikes, Trump has repeatedly claimed that the facilities were completely destroyed, although intelligence assessments contradict these claims. In July, the American network NBC reported that great damage was caused to Fordo, which was mostly destroyed, but at Natanz and Isfahan, the damage was less significant, in a way that would ostensibly allow Iran, if it chooses, to renew the uranium enrichment process within a few months. Later that month, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi promised that Tehran would not abandon its nuclear program and would not give up uranium enrichment, but admitted that the program suffered severe damage. Trump hastened to echo the remarks, describing them as corroborating the claim that the facilities were actually destroyed. Of course they were destroyed, exactly as I said, and we will do it again if necessary. Since the strike on the nuclear facilities, a question has also remained about the fate of the stockpile of enriched uranium that Iran held until then. 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity, theoretically sufficient for 10 bombs if it underwent further enrichment to the 90% level required for a nuclear weapon. There are reports that the uranium was buried in the ground after the bombings of the nuclear facilities, but claims have also been raised that Iran moved it to hiding places before the strikes. And yesterday, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, assessed that Iran did not hide the uranium in hiding places and that it remained at the same sites that were attacked, mainly at Fordo and Isfahan, and to a lesser extent at Natanz. Iran cut off cooperation with the IAEA nuclear inspectors after these strikes, and an attempt to renew the cooperation failed following the renewal of international sanctions on Tehran at the end of last month. And here, at TV in Israel, we will continue to bring you all the truth about what's happening in Israel and in this region. It is very important that you continue to spread the truth, share and follow us, and most importantly, do not forget to pray. This is a spiritual war, and the best thing to do when you're fighting a spiritual war is to pray. So let's unite in prayer for the hostages. Let's pray for the IDF soldiers. Let's pray for wisdom to our leaders, to your leaders in this situation. Let's pray for the Palestinian people to have better leadership than a terrorist organization. Let's pray for the Iranian people to have better leadership than the Ayatollah regime. Let's pray for all the innocent lives, including the Israeli people that are under attacks still, even as the ceasefire continues. Let's keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.